This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here. It is Thursday, July 30th. Do you feel kind of like we're almost there? We're almost at the weekend? Just get through today, get through tomorrow. Actually, you know what? I forgot to tell you this last week, but I've made a decision that affects all of us. I've now decided that Friday is officially the first day of the weekend. How do you feel about that? I really was it. Who was it we were talking about? Christopher Armitage said that he put one of his Substack posts. He does the Existentialist Republic, and one of his Substack posts was about how either a 30 or a 35-hour work week that has been attempted in other countries has been pretty much universally found to be positive, less burnout. People work better and smarter in the hours when they are employed, less goofing off, and that they were happier overall and more likely to actually stay in their jobs because they were happier overall. So tomorrow is the first day of the weekend because I've reached the age where I need a 3-day weekend. 2 days just doesn't cut it. By the time you do all of your errands and all of your laundry and empty all the wastebaskets and change the cat litter, suddenly it's Sunday night. And so where's the day you can just put your feet up? It's not there. So starting this week, Friday is the first day of the weekend. So I want you to wrap your head around that. That's how we're going to function from now on. So today would then technically be the last day of the week. So that's good for us. Yeah. Have you found that I'm losing my mind more and more and more as time goes on? Yes, that would be true. Big news today. Just a little while ago, Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin took himself out of the race to be the Democratic nominee for governor in Wisconsin. The front runner in that race is Francesca Hong. And while she does identify herself as a democratic socialist, there was an article, I should have saved it. There was an article was it in the Wall Street Journal? I think it must have been the most conservative thing I read. That was I'm paraphrasing here, but the gist of it was, oh my God, Francesca Hong is this wildly far-left crazy person. And if she becomes governor of Wisconsin, the apocalypse is going to be upon us. She is just, oh my God, Francesca Hong. You know what? Take a chill pill. Despite the labels we're using, but despite the labels that people even use to describe themselves, you need to ask them, hey, how do you feel about this? Because looking up in the dictionary, the definition for a democratic socialist and what they believe doesn't apply to everybody. This show is Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. But as one of my astute listeners pointed out, I'm more of a liberal than a progressive. What does that mean? I don't know. So I don't really think political labels do us much good anymore. You want to know what Francesca Hong feels is important? Why don't you ask her? Ooh, there's a wild concept. Let's ask her. Anyway, in the race in the Democratic primary in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes was in third place with 14%, according to polling. Hong has a commanding lead, according to this polling. Monday I'm going to talk to Pat Kreitlow, so we will get the absolute latest from him. But recent polling showed Hong with 44%. Second place, Milwaukee County Executive Director David Crowley, who's 15%. And then Mandela Barnes was behind those two with 14%. And you know what's interesting? Some people have said that a single poll doesn't matter as much as a trend. Well, the trend for Francesca Hong is that she is becoming more and more popular over time. So there you go. But I just think it is so ridiculous. And it isn't always just from conservative publications. Sometimes you'll see articles like, oh, Democrats are so worried that their party's going too far left. Too far left of whom? Too far left of Chuck Schumer? I can see where that wouldn't be a bad thing. Too far left, even of Hakeem Jeffries. By the way, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, pretty low approval ratings. They are still in positive digits, but both of them are showing pretty low approval ratings right now. And you know what? Guess what? Some of the Democratic Socialists are polling better. AOC polls better than Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer. So let's not get hysterical over the labels. Let's ask candidates, how do you feel about this? What's important to you? What do you want to accomplish if and or when you get elected to this office? That is much more useful information than slapping a label on them and saying you should like them or dislike them because of the label. We have a sound clip of Mandela Barnes making the announcement that he was suspending his campaign. Let's listen to that.
Last night I had a very difficult conversation with my staff. Now we're incredibly proud of all the things that we've accomplished and all the resources that we have raised to spread our message. But it's become very clear who our nominee is going to be. Now I said from the very beginning when I launched this campaign that the number one goal was taking on and defeating Tom Tiffany to deliver big wins for Democrats up and down the ticket. And now it's our time to come together, to focus our efforts on that one goal. We have to do everything to beat Tom Tiffany. This is life or death for Wisconsinites who are losing their health care under a Trump administration, people who can't afford child care, the folks who are being squeezed by bills while the rich continue to get richer. Now I got in this race because we're living in a rigged system. The rich are getting richer while the rest of us are left scrambling for crumbs. I know this firsthand. That's why I've always fought for better, as a legislator, as an organizer, as a lieutenant governor. Now, while I may be suspending this campaign, I'll never give up my fight for Wisconsin. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the folks who joined this campaign, for the people who believed in me and this movement, knew that we had a real shot at creating opportunities through bold action to improve quality of life for every single person that calls this place home. Now, we have to do everything we possibly can to defeat Tom Tiffany. And that's exactly what I'm committed to doing for the next 96 days.
Let's hope that the people who supported Mandela Barnes will continue to support a Democrat in that primary that has a better chance of winning. And, you know, there was a lot of complaint back when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, when Bernie Sanders sort of stepped back and allowed Hillary Clinton, you know, the nomination. He gave her his support. He talked about it. But there was a feeling during the campaign and after the campaign that the people who supported Bernie Sanders were so upset by the fact that he did not end up being the nominee that it is believed that many of them wouldn't support Hillary Clinton. And we see how well that turned out. So when you are going into the voting booth, you don't need to be in love with the candidate. You've got to look at all the candidates running for a race and choose who is the one that aligns most clearly with what you think is important with your values. It isn't going to be you're not going to look at any candidate and said, oh my God, that person is perfect. No, No. You're going to say, well, I like that they support this and that, but I don't really like that they support this. For everybody you look at in a particular race, what do you like about them? What do you don't like about them? Do you think that they're a good person, a strong person, a person of character? And vote accordingly. It isn't a marriage. You don't have to fall in love. You simply have to pick the best option. Not the perfect option, but the best option. Oh, by the way, the text line and the phone line are open. Lady B is eager to talk to you. I'm guessing she's eager to talk to you, because she always does such a good job. She's great with the callers, as most of you know, who talk to her on a fairly regular basis. So the phone lines are open. The text lines are open. 773-763-9278. If you're interested in being a first-time caller, and that's just too many numbers to remember, think of it this way, 773-763-WCPT. Somebody texted, and because I said Friday is now the first day of the weekend. Hi, Joan, does this mean we'll just hear a best of program on Fridays? No, that's not what it means. There will be a fresh broadcast on Fridays until I can convince the rest of the world, or at least my company, of the rightness of my vision. There will be a regular show on Friday, though I may have one or more screws loose in addition to the ones that are already shaky. Because I will be enjoying the weekend while I'm on the air. Maybe I'll fix myself a beverage. I have a coffee cup that says probably not wine. Maybe I'll break that out and then you can guess. Is it coffee? Is it water? Or is it indeed Pinot Grigio? Inquiring minds want to know. So yes, until I can sway the rest of, let's forget it. You're not going to sway the rest of the country. You're not going to sway most of the corporations. Hell, I probably can't even sway Heartland Signal, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. Let's talk about Todd Blanche. I know you don't want to. Nobody ever does. But the committee vote to potentially recommend Todd Blanche's nomination to head the DOJ officially, oh, that's not taking place. Nope. There was a lot of talk this week that it would be postponed. Well, apparently it is now postponed indefinitely. John Cornyn, Tom Tillis on the committee have made it clear they will not vote for Todd Blanche unless he puts in writing that the $1.8 billion weaponization fund is officially, formally, and completely dead. And they also want Todd Blanche to rescind this supposed offer from the IRS that gives Donald Trump, his family, and basically everybody who's ever met him immunity from IRS audits. Don't forget that part. That was also part of that same deal. The IRS can never come after Trump, his businesses, his colleagues, his coworkers, his kids, pretty much anybody who ever shook his hand. The IRS has to formally say they are auditing them as off limits, not only for now, not only in the past, but forevermore. Yeah, Tillis and Cornyn want that to be taken off the table as well. They are standing firm. Donald Trump realizes he doesn't have the votes to get Todd Blanche this nomination to be head of the DOJ instead of the deputy. It isn't going to happen with those two guys on the committee. So Donald Trump is saying that he is he's going to not withdrawing the nomination because that means he's looking for somebody else, but he is going to put the nomination on hold until after Tillis and Cornyn are no longer in office, which will be this January, because Donald Trump went after them wouldn't endorse them, tried to get people to primary them, and was successful. Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, John Cornyn. Why on earth would you end the political career of someone whose vote you need? This is how blinded Donald Trump is by revenge and retribution. You've heard the phrase, biting off your nose to spite your face? Yeah, that seems to be what Donald Trump is doing. Now, sadly, because he was the deputy and Pam Bondi has been kicked to the curb, whether or not he has the title, Todd Blanche is now functioning as the head of the DOJ just because of the process of succession. So he is allowed to be a nominee, I believe, he can work as head of the DOJ for 210 days if he's considered interim. And by the way, I read that while his nomination is actually out there, that's not considered interim. So those days don't count. And as interim leader of the DOJ, I believe it is 210 days. He can function that way. And then at the end of 210 days, he has to either be confirmed or there has to be a new nominee. So Trump is just planning to outweight everybody. He is going to not worry about a vote. For all intents and purposes, Todd Blanche is head of the DOJ. He just doesn't have the official title. And if Trump can keep him in that position until after Cassidy, Cornyn, Tillis, and all the other senators Trump has ticked off are gone, then the belief is that, like, for instance, John Cornyn was the incumbent senator from Texas. Trump threw his weight against Ken Paxton, the attorney general from Texas, the reprehensible man whose wife hates him. Pretty much everybody who's ever worked with him hates him. He's not a good guy. If Ken Paxton gets that Senate seat, and it's Texas, even though James Tallarico is by far the better man and has better experience, it's Texas and anything can happen. So if Ken Paxton wins that seat, do you think he's going to reach out to Donald Trump and say, oh, by the way, unless Todd Blanche rescinds this weaponization fund, I'm not going to vote for him? Of course not. Of course not. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. You know, at the very least, and I do mean at the very least, this has to be a blow to Blanche's ego. I don't know if he truly thought that he was going to be rubber stamped through the committee or if he saw this coming. There was no way of knowing. He's not doing much talking. Oh, he did talk to the Epstein survivors because that was also a condition that one of the senators on the committee put down, that he couldn't vote for Todd Blanche because Todd Blanche had never met even with the Epstein survivors. And so he was forced to. And it went about as well as you could expect. No, that's not true. It didn't, depending upon what your goals were for that meeting, it went very poorly. By all accounts, Todd Blanche was cynical. He was rude to the Epstein survivors. One of them, Danny Bensky, was talking to reporters on Capitol Hill. This is what Danny Bensky had to say.
What did Senator Cornyn say when you just met with him about this?
We didn't meet directly with Senator Cornyn. We met with his judiciary staffer, yeah.
There's obviously a really big vote tomorrow on the committee.
Yeah.
Are you feeling like you're swaying senators to vote no?
I hope so. I mean, we don't ever know, right? We just hope that they do the right thing. And I think at this point, we're not political, and we never have been. And it would be great to have some Republican support, especially from somebody like Senator Cornyn's office, who has been so wonderful on sex trafficking. So we just hope that he will see what this is and make sure he does the right thing.
And Danny, we're live on MS Now right now. This obviously, you going to all the Republican offices of the Senate Judiciary Committee comes after a group of you spoke with Todd Blanche a few weeks ago. Yeah. What were your reflections after that meeting, and how did the response that you received in that meeting lead to now you dropping off copies of the files to these Republicans?
Well, I think that when Senator Tillis asked Todd Blanche to meet with survivors, I don't think that he had the meeting in mind that we got. The meeting was very condescending. It was a lot of talking in circles. It was a lot of arguing semantics and not a lot of actually getting to the core points. We went in with quite a few points that we needed answers to. We needed answers to why Ghislaine Maxwell was moved. We needed answers to why investigative leads haven't been followed or even brought, Comer's office just made 2 referrals. Why aren't we following those referrals that came from your own party? And basically we walked away with absolutely no answers, and it felt like a very no-win situation. They can speak to some of that as well.
What do you mean, when you say he was condescending, can you give us some examples?
Yeah. He actually said the words "get to the point" to us. We're survivors who've been waiting to meet with him for 9 months, 8 months. We've been asking for meetings, and he very much said, can you get to the point already? Like, what are you getting at, right? So to treat us with that sort of, there was no integrity. There was no understanding that he's dealing with the largest sex trafficking ring that we've seen in the U.S. ever. Instead, it was like, you have an Epstein problem.
Yep, Todd Blanche behaving pretty much the way you would expect him to. Because you know what? He's all in on Trump. He has taken a gamble. I've said this before. He was a partner in a law firm. He resigned from the law firm. The law firm, by the way, was asked to represent Trump and didn't want to. Todd Blanche left his position as partner, which, as most of you know, is a pretty lucrative position, picked up his family, moved down to Florida, and basically made defending and working with Donald Trump his whole life, his whole career. Do you think he'd be smart enough to see how that has worked out for other lawyers, like in Trump's first term? Christopher Armitage, in the Existentialist Republic that he published today, it has this headline: not only should Todd Blanche not run the Justice Department, he should be charged with the following crimes. And Christopher goes on to talk about 4 federal criminal statutes that Armitage believes could earn Todd Blanche 20 years in prison. Yep. Todd Blanche should have made a phone call to Rudy Giuliani, don't you think, before he decided to quit his law firm and move down to Florida? Hey, Rudy, how did that work out for you? Sidney Powell, who wanted to release the Kraken, how'd that work out for you? Jenna Ellis, how'd that work out for you as you were crying in front of the bar saying, oh, I didn't know it was so bad. I would never have done it if I'd have only known. If you're a lawyer, isn't it your job to know? Call me crazy. Yep, everything Trump touches dies. And the second Todd Blanche deviates in the slightest way from the party line, he's going to learn who Donald Trump really is. He's going to learn that loyalty only flows one way. Supposedly, when people work for Trump, he's telling them how great they are and how much he likes them and admires them, blah, blah, blah. And they believe it. So they're always, they're dumbfounded. What do you mean he's firing me? He loves me. No, actually, he doesn't. You were useful, and now you're not. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with more calls and texts right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
I got a very lengthy text that basically boils down to Democrats have to get away from purity tests. I agree. Democrats have to get off their butts and vote, even if they're, I'm just not enthused about these candidates. Doesn't matter. We've seen what happens when Democrats stay home, and it isn't pretty. If Democrats turn out in numbers, we win. And if we win, we can bring about a more just, a more sane society. We can rein in the crazies. There is no excuse for saying that you don't want to vote or you don't want to vote for a particular Democratic candidate. If there's one Dem on the ballot, that's who you've got to vote for. That is how we got where we are today. Too many people wanting purity tests. Oh, they're a corporate Democrat. Well, I don't like corporate Democrats either, but if it's the only Democrat on the ballot, vote for him anyway. I agree. Let us go to the phone lines. Our good friend Dave is on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. So, are you doing a Lawrence O'Donnell now then on Fridays? Or what?
Oh, he actually is off. He's actually not there. And no, I haven't negotiated a contract like that. It's really MSNBC, or MS Now rather, they decide, well, it's true kind of any organization. If they feel that you are valuable enough, they will make concessions to you. And, Lawrence probably said, look, did you know Lawrence was, when MSNBC first premiered, Lawrence was one of the anchors. He has been with them for a very long time. Supposedly, when Andy Lack was head of NBC, he wanted to get rid of Lawrence O'Donnell, and there was an outcry. Do you remember there was a protest? Mm-hmm. People were writing in. People were picketing in front of the building, and Andy Lack, who put his tail between his legs and re-signed Lawrence O'Donnell. So, you know what? If Lawrence can do it, I should work toward it. Of course, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe on Fridays, she's young. She's got a lot of energy. Maybe Patty Vasquez wants to do like 5 hours of radio. Maybe we can get Richard Chew to come back. Maybe Edwin can do an extra show. I don't know.
Or really shoot for the goal, pull a Rachel Maddow.
There you go.
Anyway,
Lady B is back at the studio. She could probably do this show all by herself without me. So maybe that's the answer, Lady B.
Or Paul Shivari.
Yeah.
Paulie does a good one, too. Anyway, on that, isn't today supposed to be the day that Katie Fang was going to be getting those unredacted files?
Yes, it was supposed to. What I read was that it was supposed to happen 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central Time. I have not seen anything about it yet. What this was, Katie Fang went to court and said, the Epstein files should have been released. Me and activists and journalists, we were all hurt by that. We have standing to take this to court. And the judge said, yeah, I can see where you were hurt by that. So you can do this. And then the judge said, the DOJ has to release everything by Thursday or Friday. And then they didn't. And then they said they couldn't. And then, it's one of those where they get to say, and then you get to respond, and then they get to respond to your response. But supposedly there was supposed to be a court ruling. There was supposed to be a deadline in that give and take today, 2 p.m. Central. I'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, because I hadn't heard much about it.
Today was the day.
And talking about, once kind of how Trump eats them up and spits them out, I believe I had heard somewhere where that Michael Cohen kissed and made up with Trump again.
Really?
Yeah, I heard it about 2 weeks ago. I mean, this guy got disbarred and everything, and then, as did Rudy, he kind of...
Where did you read that? Because I haven't seen that.
I heard it on TV. They were talking about that about 2 weeks ago. I was surprised because I remember how he ratted out on him, and they were just, bitter enemies, and he had like a house arrest even for a while. And
he went to jail.
Yes.
And Trump just, just let him go.
And like when you mentioned that thing with Blanche, this guy, he just legally accurate. I seen him now, but I mean, talk about the gall. Treated them with contempt like he did. What a creep.
Yeah. And, you know, it wasn't like there were cameras there and he had to perform for Donald Trump. This was a private meeting. You know, he could have been, at the very least, he could have faked empathy.
Yeah. And I still think what's going to happen when the time comes, Trump and them are going to have some unmarked plane, and people from maybe not even of this country are going to snatch old Maxwell up and take her to a country that doesn't do extraditions.
Who knows?
I seriously think so.
Who knows? Because there was a resolution in the Senate that passed unanimously where the senators were saying that Ghislaine Maxwell should not under any circumstances get a pardon. And it was voted, it was just like an announcement, like a resolution, but it was voted unanimously. Every member of the Senate came out and said Ghislaine Maxwell should never get a pardon.
She shouldn't have got this light duty prison either. But anyway, let me get the last, so you got others waiting. That I was telling Lady B, I read the other day where Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer now has a special assistant to Hegseth. It was unclear what his duties will be for Hegseth's office, but he's going to be as a civilian, classified as a special government employee. In his new role. And
I wonder what sort of photo op Hegseth wants to use him for.
All macho and that. I guess he signed back up to be in the Marine Reserves, and I think he's kind of passed something for a scout or some kind of, more of an elite Marine thing already. But if you recall, he's the one that was married to Sarah Palin's daughter at Bristol.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Just when you think you can live without Sarah Palin, some aspect of her life intrudes back again into your reality.
And back, if I recall, he had a little bit of a drinking problem, too, there for a while. So,
there were a lot of problems in the Palin family.
Feather. And then lastly, I also read where they're going to rename Joint Base Charleston to Joint Base Lindsey Graham.
Oh, isn't that special?
I had seen some stuff. I ain't going to say what people said, but you know how they...
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, Joan, let me get off. Others can get through. I just thought I'd get them tidbits, and thank you.
By the way, when I was talking to Dave, I pulled up to see if there was any update on the Katie Fang lawsuit that said that based on the Epstein Files Transparency Act, all of the files should have been released with basically no redactions. As near as I can tell, I have not found anything that the court has done today, but the hearing was supposed to start at 2 o'clock Chicago time. So let's keep an eye on that. Let's go back to the phone lines. Greg's on the line from Lake in the Hills. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Joan. Thanks for taking my call. The reason I'm calling today, the main purpose is to remind the listeners and about the Oath Political app. I say it that way, the Oath Political app, because I think that's the best way to find it if you put it into your, like I'm doing, into my Google search bar. And the reason I like the Oath Political app is it's a way of donating money that you're willing to part with for the candidates that need it the most, instead of
isn't that the app? Because sometimes people want to donate money, but they don't know if it's a lost cause or if it's really going to make a difference. And I think Oath, that's part of what Oath does. Like, you might get a plea from, Amy Acton, to help fund her campaign. But Oath might tell you, she really is so far ahead in the polls. She doesn't need your money. Your money is better spent here.
They won't even tell you that, because that's not something that their algorithm automatically looks for those candidates, first of all, who are Democratic or independent, because they do both, not Republicans. They don't get into the traitorous party of the United States, thank God. But they go out there and they look for candidates in all races across the U.S. Democratic or Independent. They look for those races where a candidate has a potential to win, even though it might be leaning a Republican or whatever. But these candidates, if they were to receive more money, they're viable candidates. That's the only thing really standing between them and a possible election. Mm-hmm. But this way, you're not giving, like you said in the beginning, you're not giving money to, let's say, the most popular candidate out there. And it doesn't mean that most popular candidate isn't good. They're very good, but they're already well-heeled. They're well-funded. So what I've done is, because I'm so sick and tired of all these text messages that I get, and this won't fully alleviate that. But what I'm doing now is I've decided to donate a certain amount of money every month to two different causes through oath, and one is for taking back the House. And then the other one is, taking back the House, and the other one is supporting the groups that are out there to protect our democracy. And they've got several. They've got probably 12 different things set up for this autopilot method. And my final thing I'd like to say is I tried to tell you through the text message, but I'm trying to remember her name, but she does the chop wood and carry water.
Jessica Craven, I think that is.
Yeah, the one I've always enjoyed that you introduced her and her the way she does things through her Substack and so forth to the audience, and she's excellent.
Yeah, she is. We haven't had her on for a while. We'll have to get her back. Sometimes I forget about people. Yeah, we'll have to reach out to her again.
I highly recommend.
Yeah.
It was about a month back. She had on Brian Derrick from Oath. This is the guy that I've recommended to you, to Richard in the morning, and to Patty, and also to your people who are, there's two different places I've sent emails to, and I've never gotten any response from them. And these are the people who are supposed to be, involved with setting up things for WCPT and Heartland Signal. I get no response at all. It's ridiculous. WCPT, like Carl from Kankakee always recommends, there should be some type of a link or a barcode, a QR code on your website that takes you right to Oath. And I have nothing. Oath is a nonprofit, but I'm telling you, these people, in my opinion, they're the best way to donate to the candidates out there who need it. No one can tell all these other people who they are and what they have. I only have so much money, and I'm not a rich man. I'm a retired guy. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm saying too much.
No, you're not.
Now, thanks very much.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the call. We are going to take a break. We will be, one quick text first. This Maddie texted in that her favorite T-shirt says, "Of all the things I've lost, I miss my mind the most." Maddie, I feel you. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
For the first hour of the show, Monday through Thursday, you might have heard that growl. Bentley just came in to get some pets and is mad that I just stopped petting him. We spend the first hour taking your calls and reading your texts. Just go. I can't pet you anymore. Let's go to the phone lines. Ron's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron.
Hello. Speaking of crazies, nobody should ever put a microphone in front of Tommy Tuberville.
Oh, my God. Isn't it extraordinary, the things that he said? What was the one insult I heard that really applies to him? It's something like, "I love how you state the obvious with such enthusiasm."
Yeah.
He's something else. But at least he's quitting. He's running for governor, so there's that.
That's good. Ron Johnson and Ron DeSantis, they're not much better either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Ron Johnson is just crazy, but Tommy Tuberville is. What can I say that's even remotely kind? Ignorant, uneducated, ill-spoken.
Yeah.
What? All of the above.
Far out. Yeah. This investigation of Dr. Fauci. This is just a I think it's just the diversion away from the Epstein files and the war in Iraq. Just something that to give the media to get away from the Epstein files. That's my opinion.
Well, ordinarily I would agree with you, but Rand Paul is a really sort of unique human being. And I think it's quite possible that what Dr. Fauci said is true, that Rand Paul is obsessed with Dr. Anthony Fauci. He just is obsessed. He wants to relitigate 2020 and COVID and the things that were said. And Rand, we love you, but let's move on.
Yeah, what's next? Benghazi again?
Ugh.
And also, speaking of diversions, Trump has a new construction project. He wants to reconstruct the Dulles International Airport. So that's another.
Yes, he wants to improve it.
So how many projects does he have now? 10 or 12 he has going in Washington.
Mm-hmm. And despite the fact that the courts have tried to put a stop to it, the construction on the ballroom is still going forward. I just read that yesterday, that despite all of the court orders that say, this was done illegally, et cetera, and so forth, they're still building it. They're still working on it. So, yeah. And now he wants to redo the columns in front of the White House. He wants his arch. He wants to continue to work on the reflecting pool. I mean, this is what he loves. He loves redecorating and construction. In Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Snow's book, somebody told them that they walked into the Oval Office and Donald Trump had super glue, and he was gluing some of that, that gold filigree that is all over the Oval Office now. He had super glue, and he was gluing a piece of that up on, I believe it was above the fireplace. Like, this is what a president should be doing.
All right. Thank you much. All right.
Thank you, Ron.
Bye.
We've got some interesting text here. Bob from Elgin. I'm for being so far left that Jeffries and Schumer can't catch up. In other words, they should be left be. Oh, Bob, very clever. Very clever. Okay. Another text. Why create the Democratic Socialist label in the first place? Just call yourself a Democrat. Seems simple to me. The ultimate question is how a Democratic Socialist will compete against the Republican candidate in a purple state. You are absolutely correct. Though I think, just as Democratic Socialist is kind of unwieldy, I think Democrat, because what does that mean? Are you a middle of the road, or are you conservative? Are you lefty? So many political labels are all but meaningless. You use the word, you know what you mean, but the person who hears it may have a whole different idea of what it means. But you're absolutely right. What matters? What is the state? What is the district? What is the area that you are trying to represent? The area that you are trying to get to elected office so that you can help these particular voters out. Who are they? What do they need? What do they want? Where are they politically? That's the candidate you want. Doesn't matter if they call themselves middle of the road or conservative or socialist. You want a candidate that the people of the district they're running in get excited about. You want a candidate who has tapped in to their needs, their wants, and their desires, and speaks to that, and says, I know you care about the price of cereal. I'm going to make sure that the government does everything in its power to get the price of cereal down, because, in a lot of cases, the price of cereal went up a lot during COVID, and they didn't really come back down to where they were before. Corporate profits. Can you say corporate profits, anyone? So, yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It absolutely is not. And, the people that live in your area know what they want. They know what they want from their candidate, and that's the candidate they should vote for. And that's the candidate who should be nominated. Yeah. Okay. A couple of things I didn't get around to, like, the Iran war. Well, the news isn't great. Not that there have been a lot of deaths, but the war in Iran seems to be expanding. Slowly but surely. There was a drone attack in Egypt, and now people are wondering if the Suez Canal is at risk. The canal for Bab el-Mandeb is being monitored and attempted to be controlled by the Houthis. We've got the Strait of Hormuz that Iran is trying to claim. Suez Canal is now believed to be in play. There was a drone attack on Egypt. And remember, we already heard that Bahrain and Kuwait, in a sort of a secret mission, sent jet fighters to drop bombs. The reporting today is those Houthis that are trying to get control of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Saudi Arabia is reported to be planning a sea and land offensive against the Houthis. So, and there's civilian unrest in Jordan, because even though it is a very repressive state and people who speak out are liable to end up in prison and often do, there was an open letter that said to the government of Jordan, kick the Americans out, get rid of the American military base. We are tired of being in the sights of Iran. So let's see, that's Jordan, things are going bad. Saudi Arabia is ramping things up. Bahrain and Kuwait are flying secret missions. Drone attack in Egypt. Possible questions about the Suez Canal. And other than the obvious, Mrs. Lincoln, how else did you enjoy the play? Did you enjoy the play? When you read about, for instance, World War I, the events that led up to World War I, it was all these different dominoes that fell. One or two of those would have never resulted in World War I, but it was like a little thing here, a little thing there, a little thing there, a little thing there, and suddenly it all added up to a world war. Let's hope that these are one-offs, that this doesn't become a wider conflict. Right now, there's no reason really to have that hope, but I still think we should have that hope. Things are getting a little bit bigger. The conflict is getting a little bit bigger. More people, for a long time, our allies in the Middle East just sort of sat back and were letting us take care of things as we promised them we would. But as it goes on and they are more the victim of Iranian attacks, it was obvious they weren't going to sit back forever. And it's obvious we don't seem to have any idea how to bring this to a conclusion. So I guess they've decided they've got nothing to lose at this point. Let's take a break, and we'll get back with more right after the news.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I don't know if that went out over the air, but Lady B fooled me. There was a pause, and I, of course, started talking. And then there was more audio from the studio. So let me start again. Happy to welcome back Amanda Marcotte. She is a senior politics editor for Salon.com. She contributes to their YouTube show, Standing Room Only. Amanda, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am just peachy. By the way, I started the show today by saying that because I personally need a 3-day weekend, I've decided that the first day of the weekend is Friday. So, I wish you a wonderful weekend that will start tomorrow as soon as you wake up.
Yeah, I wish, but alas, my employer will not allow that.
Well, technically, my employer won't allow it either. But I've just decided that on Fridays, I'm going to be even more unhinged than I am earlier in the week. So it kind of feels frisky. I think that would be a good thing, a good way to do it. Anyway, I want to talk to you about one of your most recent articles on J.D. Vance. I'm reading this, and the gist of it to me seems to be that he somehow thinks he's the next Obama, or he is modeling himself after Barack Obama. I love this line that you wrote. Vance's public arrogance certainly suggests he believes himself equal to Barack Obama in both intellect and charm. I'm sorry, I can't even read that with a straight face. J.D. Vance has been described as having the personality of a wooden chair. So how does this transition in his mind take place, Amanda?
I mean, I don't know what's going on in his head, but it is hard for me to miss the fact that he seems to be checking off all the boxes to look like the Republican Obama. And on paper, you could see how his benefactors really thought that he would be, because he published his first memoir at 32, just like Barack Obama did. He has this wife that's beautiful and more accomplished than he is, just like Obama did. Okay, one second. You guys, sorry, cat fight.
Oh, that's okay. My dog was in here earlier begging to be petted. We had to banish him.
Oh, yeah, my big cat is bullying my little cat, and I don't know what to do about it, but...
Aw.
Yeah. But, yeah, so... he thinks that he basically was also doing the young senator from the Midwest who was going to immediately move to the White House maneuver. But, he screwed up along the way by taking a stint as the vice president first, and also by being J.D. Vance, which is to say he'll never be Obama.
Yeah. I don't see much of Obama in him. One of the things that I think drew people to Obama was he had this hopeful vision for the future, and you felt that he stood for things. You felt that he had a moral fiber, whereas even the people who semi-like J.D. Vance talk about what a chameleon he is, that whatever seems to be the right thing to say right now, that's what he says. The right thing to do right now, he says it. And if a month from now the opposite is true, then he'll be the opposite of it. He doesn't seem to have a clear vision. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's definitely, I think, my perception of him, and I think most people's perception of him, but it's clear that he doesn't think that. He has this whole book out about how he converted to Catholicism, and now he's got the point of his entire book tour and his book was to argue that he's a man of great moral conviction and of great Christian faith that drives him. And I think that gets to the point of my article, which is J.D. Vance is positioning himself to be a certain kind of politician, and it's just not a very convincing it's just not convincing anybody, because like you said, we look at him and we do not see a man of great moral conviction who's acting out of a deep faith. We see a chameleon who will say or do whatever it takes to get money or power or, to fulfill his political ambitions.
And in that respect, the fact that his transactional nature, he seems a lot more like Trump than he does Barack Obama. What have you read about him or in his books? What is your sense of how he thinks of himself? Like, what adjectives would he use to describe himself based on what you've read about him and what he says?
Well, again, he describes himself as a person of great moral character and conviction, right? But there's an incident, there's this thing in his book that really struck me as kind of telling the truth on accident, right? Which is, he talks about the reason that he converted to Catholicism was because of Peter Thiel, who is Catholic, or says he's Catholic, even though, just like J.D. Vance, he seems to have his own esoteric right-wing version of Catholicism that has nothing to do with the Pope or Catholicism as most people practice it.
Yeah.
But he said that, Peter Thiel convinced him because Peter Thiel is possibly the smartest man I've ever met. Now, do I actually think that J.D. Vance thinks that Peter Thiel is the smartest man he's ever met? No, I don't think he thinks that. Peter Thiel is kind of a like wackaloon goofball in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Do I think, however, that Peter Thiel is a very wealthy man who has funded J.D. Vance's rise in politics and therefore needs to be flattered by being told that he's the smartest man that J.D. Vance has ever met? Yes. And so that's a long roundabout way of saying that it kind of seems like J.D. Vance converted to Catholicism because that would flatter the rich guy who's bankrolling him.
Yeah, I mean, he has been described, I think, quite accurately as Peter Thiel's sock puppet. I mean, even with all of the resources that Peter Thiel threw behind him, he really didn't win that Senate seat in Ohio by a huge margin.
No, he didn't. It was basically, he actually ran a little bit behind Trump's margin in the same state.
Yeah. And Peter Thiel, I am surprised to hear you say that he was or considers himself still Catholic because he's such an anarchist. He subscribes to the theory that democracy is no good, that the perfect country is ruled by the people like Peter Thiel, the people who've really made a success of themselves. And they're really the ones, because they're so smart, Amanda, clearly they're really, really smarter than everybody else. Otherwise, they wouldn't be successful. So really, don't you think they should be in charge?
Yeah, when Peter Thiel says that he's a Catholic, you get the strong impression that he also thinks he's the Pope, or like should be anyway, because he's been going around and they do it behind closed doors with all these NDAs on it, but some of the information has leaked out about what's going on. He's been doing a lecture series on the Antichrist, and I'm not kidding, where he unrolls these theories that he has created about who the Antichrist is and what they would look like. And his theory, of course, is that the Antichrist is going to be a progressive person, possibly somebody who believes in climate change. He's floated Greta Thunberg as a really good candidate for who the Antichrist could be. So when I say Peter Thiel is a Catholic, it's a word he uses to describe himself, but I wouldn't say that I would consider his belief system to be anything like the Pope's Catholicism.
So you don't think he's going to be invited to the Vatican anytime soon?
If so, it would only be because the Pope wants to have a face-to-face with him about whatever the hell he's been saying to other people.
And the Antichrist, how is that different from the devil? I was raised Catholic, and believe me, I was, 12 years of Catholic school with the Notre Dame nuns who did not brook any nonsense. And, I remember, the Trinity and Jesus and the devil, but I don't remember being taught a lot about an Antichrist. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, so the whole Antichrist thing, again, it shows that Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance aren't really their version of Catholicism is not what you or I think of as Catholicism, because the whole Antichrist mythology in the U.S. culture really goes back to the 1970s, and it's really more of an evangelical thing. And honestly, it comes from horror movies. It really took root in evangelical culture in the 1970s because of The Exorcist and The Omen and Rosemary's Baby and movies like that. These horror movies about, demon possession and the Antichrist really resonated with a lot of people, and evangelical ministers, as they are good at doing, are willing to take whatever is in pop culture and, use it to recruit people to their churches. It's not anything deeper than that. And so what's funny is now you have this entire white evangelical world that has this elaborate mythology about the Antichrist, again, which has more to do with Rosemary's Baby than anything in the Bible. And now you're seeing people like Peter Thiel pick it up and run with it because it suits their political ends.
I did an interview, oh my gosh, it's probably been at least a year or two ago, with somebody I know who's a student of political movements over the centuries. And we talked about Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin, the reason I wanted to have that conversation is because I was reading that a lot of these tech bros, Curtis Yarvin used to be considered just an absolute fringe nut job. Curtis Yarvin is now cited by people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk as having a really sound philosophy. And as I recall, Yarvin's belief is that democracy is a failure. Democracy should be replaced by a monarchy that is similar to a corporation, and that the United States shouldn't have a president. We should have a national CEO, or, also known as a dictator, according to Curtis Yarvin. And I remember first hearing about Curtis Yarvin when I was reading years ago about Peter Thiel. It's just, it's very, very, very bizarre. And, you're right. I mean, I can see J.D. Vance sucking up to Peter Thiel by becoming a Roman Catholic. But remember, it wasn't all that long ago when Donald Trump was sort of in a war of words with Pope Leo, the war of words that caused Giorgia Meloni in Italy to turn against Trump. But J.D. Vance at the time posted a lot of really offensive things on social media, but one of them was that, what was it? It was something along the lines of, well, Pope Leo better learn his better learn his catechism or his religious philosophy a little bit better. Seriously? The Pope?
Yeah, he said that the Pope should be more careful when he thinks he's going to opine on theology.
Oh my God, that is just breathtaking.
Yeah, and so J.D. Vance, who says he converted in, I do believe, 2019. Definitely feels like he is more of a theologian than the Pope.
Yeah, isn't that terrifying? We need to take a break. I'm talking with Amanda Marcotte, senior politics editor for Salon.com. She contributes to the YouTube show Standing Room Only. We're going to be back with much more right after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Amanda Marcotte, Salon.com senior political editor and contributor to the YouTube channel Standing Room Only. Amanda, I want to talk to you about other things, but I can't seem to get past J.D. Vance. I just can't seem to let it go. Do you think that he will be? Right now, would you bet money that he would be the Republican nominee?
I wouldn't bet a lot of money. Right now he's slightly ahead of Rubio in polling, but I think that just goes to tell you that part of the reason is that there's just nobody in the field that's going to that Republican voters really care that much about. There's a real, when you kind of look at the data, when you look at the focus groups, their attitude about him is like, I guess so. I don't think he's got the juice. I wouldn't be surprised if a candidate who excites them at all, like puts their foot in the ring. I think JD Vance is toast. And I think he could even be beat by Rubio just because at this point, he's such a weird phony that I don't think that even Republicans who have a lot of tolerance for weird phonies are here for it.
Which is interesting because speaking of weird phonies, I mean, Marco Rubio has virtually abandoned pretty much anything that he used to stand for and believe in. And there was reporting, of course, when, everybody was writing about the when Netanyahu was in the Situation Room and pitching Trump on this invasion of Iran. And when Netanyahu left, supposedly Marco Rubio was like, I don't know that everything he said was true. But in the room, the only person who really sort of, from the reporting by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Snow, the only person who really stood up and said, you know what, guys, this is a really bad idea. This is not something that we should do, was J.D. Vance. So, I know publicly he wouldn't ever go against Trump, but it does seem like behind the scenes, actually, part of the reason I don't know if you ever watched the Bulwark podcast. Tim Miller and Jonathan Last were talking to one another. The Bulwark is an organization of Republicans who've been never Trumpers from the get-go. And Jonathan Last said that Donald Trump will never forgive J.D. Vance for being right about Iran. And I don't know if you saw them. They were standing next to one another at Lindsey Graham's funeral. They were standing next to one another, but they might as well have been in separate rooms. They didn't look at one another. They didn't talk. They didn't interact. It was really, I thought, very, very telling. Did you see that? Did it seem that way to you?
Yeah, I think so. And what's really ironic about that is that J.D. Vance is right that the Iran war was a political loser for Donald Trump. I think that he understood he's not stupid, and he understood from the beginning that how this was going to go. And I think that's why he both warned Trump against it and then also went to the press and leaked on background that he had done so, right? It's so obvious that the one person who stood up to Trump was J.D. Vance. Stories are coming from J.D. Vance and his people, right? Mm-hmm. But in the end, because he stood up to Trump, it's going to ruin him. Because, as you say, Trump is never going to let him. He's going to find some way to sabotage his presidential run, is what I suspect, because he is just that guy. He is a petty baby who can't let anybody ever else be right or, smarter than him or whatever, which is basically everybody. So,
well, you're seeing that play out right now in the committee that has been talking to Todd Blanche. He has alienated Cornyn. He's alienated Tillis. He is, not that he's on the committee, but he's alienated Bill Cassidy. He specifically destroyed these people's career, and now he expects them to just roll over and vote the way he wants them to?
I mean, to be fair, I expected them to roll over and vote the way he wants them to. I mean, past is predicate, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're right. At the end of the day, by taking away all the incentives to do what Trump wants, he just, despite writing all these books called The Art of the Deal or having them ghostwritten for him, he doesn't actually understand that you need to give to get, right? Mm-hmm. That these are building about a coalition is about keeping people on side. The only thing he's ever had to dangle over people's heads is threats. And once you've actually killed somebody's Senate career, you don't have it's kind of wild how much they've continued to go along with him when they really shouldn't, because they owe him nothing. There's nothing, he's ruined their careers, and yet they still go along because Republicans are just natural followers, I think.
Well, Bill Cassidy, remember Bill Cassidy voted for the War Powers resolution and said publicly that he was really mad because Donald Trump didn't consult any of the senators or any of the Congress people. And what I read was that Donald Trump then called him up and said, oh, you know what? From now on, you guys are going to be a part of the decision-making process, I promise. And then Bill Cassidy went back and said, okay, all right, he's got my vote. Okay. He gave me what I wanted.
At the end of the day, I think they back Trump on all this stuff because they want to. Like, they wanted to attack Iran. They want to do all these bad things. And they kind of almost use Trump as cover.
Yep.
And the Todd Blanche, like, I fully expect that by next week, John Cornyn and Tom Tillis will have some paper-thin ruse for why Todd Blanche has given them some little thing that they can use to say that they stood up and they got something. And at the end of the day, whatever it is that they get is going to be meaningless. Like, he'll write on a piece of paper, I won't use something called the Anti-Weaponization Fund to pay off Trump's political allies, and then they'll just change the name of it or something.
Yeah. Well, you know, as of today, from what I've read, Donald Trump has decided that this vote doesn't have to be taken. He's already the deputy, so he's head of the DOJ in practice, if not in name. And Trump said, you know, I'm just going to wait. I'll wait till January when these guys who are opposing me are just done, when they're out of office. So either way, Trump gets what he wants. Maybe that's why they were eager to stand up to him, because it's really kind of meaningless. I also want to talk to you about what you wrote about Pete Hegseth. And do you think we should all get our testosterone levels checked? I mean, you know, it probably could help women out, too, with, you know, a little more muscle mass and, you know, being just a little bit more, I don't know, bold.
Imagine if you went to the doctor and you were like, I would like more testosterone, please. And they'd be like, but you're a woman. I think that conversation would probably go pretty poorly.
Well, it might. This obsession with this kind of strange hyper masculinity, where do you think that's coming from?
Insecurity.
Well, that would make sense.
I mean, it's fun to just think about go backwards and sort of reverse engineer why Pete Hegseth is obsessed with testosterone supplements and injections. Where does he get this idea? Well, I know one likely source of it, which is if you go online, there's all these influencers who appeal to deeply insecure men by saying, well, maybe it's your low T and you just need to get testosterone injections. Maybe that's why you can't press 500 pounds or whatever. I don't know what a good chest press is for men. And then you look and you see Pete Hegseth tries to put out these workout videos where he's bragging about how much he can lift, but they're edited to try to make it look like he lifted that much, but he obviously can't. I suspect that Pete Hegseth spends a lot of time watching wellness influencers who are telling him that he's not man enough because he can't, press 500 pounds. And that T supplements are the solution. And he just went, yeah, let's do that for everybody. And it's just sad. Like he's imposing his own.
Well, that's okay. We probably hit the drop the curse button. So this is a good time to take a break. Amanda Marcotte and I'll be right back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Amanda Marcotte is the senior politics editor at Salon.com. She also contributes to the YouTube show Standing Room Only. Some people are starting to say that Tucker Carlson is planning a run for president, either as a Republican or as an independent. You wrote about, this was been a while ago that you wrote about Tucker Carlson. that you said he was not leaving the Republican Party. Rather, he'd rather take it over. Explain that.
Yeah, so he's either going to run or trying to exert leverage to decide who the actual nominee is going to be. But this whole I'm not a Republican, I'm quitting act, that's just like political theater. He knows, he can read a poll. He can see that Republican voters are not happy with the Republican Party. One of the reasons that they back Donald Trump, perversely, is that they persist in believing that he's not a typical Republican. And in some ways he's not, in his affect, but in his policy, obviously, as the Iran war shows, he is.
Yeah.
But there is a hunger, there continues to be a hunger out there for a politician who's like, I'm not your typical Republican. I'm tough, and I'm going to take a stand against those guys that you hate, and I'm going to take over the party and turn it into what you want it to be. And I think that him saying he's leaving the party is his first step to using that kind of image to take it over. Just like Trump did, right? Trump ran as the not a Republican and took the party over. And so I think that Tucker Carlson is obviously eyeballing a similar trajectory. It's just how that's going to play out is the only question, whether he actually runs or if he's just trying to get leverage.
Yeah, well, he kind of reminds me a little bit of what we're hearing from Rahm Emanuel. It's like two people, I sense, who just don't want to be sidelined. They still want to be important, and they want to be invited to make all these speeches, and they want to be on television, and they want to have an audience. I think Tucker Carlson has as much shot at being president in 2028 as Rahm Emanuel does, which is not hardly anything at all. Do you get the sense that Tucker just wants people, just pay attention to me, please?
Yeah, if he doesn't run, I think it'll end up being because he doesn't like leaving his house that often. And being the president running for president means being out of your house all the time. That said, I have to disagree. I was at the RNC in 2024. You were too. And if I recall, or that was the DNC.
Yeah. The RNC I was supposed to go to was the one that got canceled, I think, because of COVID.
Well, I saw Tucker speak at the RNC, and honestly, he brought down the House.
Really?
He was more popular than Trump. The only person that got a bigger reception than him was Hulk Hogan.
Wow.
I mean,
was it something that he said that people responded to, or did they just like him as a person? I
think he's good at working the crowd. The scariest thing about watching Tucker speak is because you're in the press box, right? So you're sitting behind the stage and you can see the teleprompter and you can see if they have notes. And Tucker went up there without any notes, no teleprompter. He made that speech up on the fly.
Wow.
And he was really just resonating. He was just definite. You could see in real time that he was trying out ideas on the crowd, and what they were liking, he would lean into. And unfortunately, what they were liking was his most fascist ideas. His most authoritarian ideas. So I think he's very capable of manipulating these people more than Trump even.
What was something that he said that the crowd went wild for?
Oh God, it's been a couple of years. It was basically just him. The gist of his speech was like, I don't want to be unfair here, but my feeling of the takeaway was that he kind of was leaning into this idea that democracy had failed and that it had to be killed to be revived,
Interesting.
Yeah. So he was rolling out a lot of very authoritarian ideas. This notion that the country had just gone so far down the drain that the only thing that was going to work was, functionally an authoritarian movement to wrestle control back for the minority that is MAGA, right?
I think he's an interesting guy. That little Tucker man. I think that And the funny thing is, my sense is that he's always been somebody who cared about being on camera more than what he was saying. I remember a million years ago, back when he was, I don't know, he might have been on CNN. He was doing like a point counterpoint show, and Jon Stewart was the guest. And I remember seeing clips of that where Jon Stewart looked at him and said, this would be a terrific forum to actually have a debate about issues and the different sides to an issue. But he basically said to Tucker, all you care about is being outrageous and, and making headlines and getting eyeballs with essentially clickbait. But this is a waste of this forum. We should really be talking seriously about some of that stuff. And Tucker Carlson kind of doesn't know what to do with that if you see the clip. But he's always been kind of a weird guy. I think that's my takeaway.
Yeah, but it's been it's been more than 20 years since that happened. And Tucker's only gotten better at reading his audience and leaning into what will provoke them. He definitely says a lot of weird things in public when he's giving speeches. There's one clip that at Standing Room Only we go back to all over and over again, where he was at some Republican event and he starts going off on how daddy's home when he's talking about Trump, and daddy's going to beat you with a belt, and you've been a naughty little girl, and daddy's going to beat you. Yeah. No, it's really gross. Is really gross, but the crowd loved it.
You're kidding me.
Oh yeah, no, they loved it. They loved his because they're weird too. And so yeah, I think if you asked him in a sober moment if that was the smartest of analogies to compare Trump and treating the country like an abusive father beating his daughter,
Ugh.
I think he would probably say that wasn't his intention, but he couldn't help himself because he can vibe with the crowd and he knows what they want to hear. And if it's gross and sexual and weird, sure, he'll go there.
Wow. That sounds about right. Actually, I was going to say something else, but that sounds about right. I want to talk to you. This is not relating to something that you've written an article about, at least not yet. But I find it very disconcerting that so many Democrats are not, Republicans forget about it. They think we're all communists anyway. But Democrats are wringing their hands over the rise of the democratic socialist who has radical ideas like, you should be able to afford childcare, or maybe it should even be free. And, you should probably have health care. Things that a few decades ago would not have been considered radical ideas at all. CNN was talking about a poll they did where they surveyed Democrats, and they found that Democrats viewed democratic socialists more favorably than just the regular Democrats in the party right now. And you see this. I saw a survey or a poll earlier this week where it was rating the popularity of certain Dems, and at the bottom of the list was Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. What drives me crazy about this is I was always told that the Democratic Party is a big tent. There may be, because back, a million years ago, there were some pretty conservative Democrats who rubbed me the wrong way. But it's a big tent. It's a big tent, and we have to embrace anybody who vote blue, no matter who. Well, now all of a sudden, it's the more left-leaning or the people who are addressing actual needs of the working class that seemed to be ascending in popularity. And the Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries of the world don't seem to know what to do about that. Oh, we wanted young people in the party, but we wanted them to have the same ideas we did, and we wanted them to do everything the way we did it. But they have their own ideas, Amanda. I just don't know what to do with that. I don't understand what's going on in Democratic politics. How do you view it?
I think where a lot of Democratic leaders lose the plot is they see some of the Democratic Socialist ideas are unpopular. You know, because they have people like prison abolitionists and people who want to nationalize healthcare and whatnot in the mix, and that those don't poll super well. But I think what they're missing here, there was a really interesting study done recently that shows why people will vote, like people who are a little bit more moderate will vote for somebody that is to their left or to their right, depending on what party they're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that they believe that person will fight for them. So,
yep.
You know, you see this a lot in New York City with Zohran Mamdani. Like, a lot of his voters don't necessarily agree with all of his ideas, though they like his top line ideas like free buses, you know, government run grocery stores, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, what they do believe is that he's a trustworthy guy because he says what he means and that he will fight for stuff. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, most voters are smart enough to recognize that in our political system, you're not going to get everything you ask for. So why not ask for a lot? And then what you do get is something. Whereas the current Democratic leadership, their attitude is ask for something small and then settle for nothing. Does that make sense? Like, it's just like, this is very classic bargaining strategy. You're like, okay, you're like, I want $100,000, so I'm going to ask for $1 million, and we're going to bargain it down to $100,000. I think most voters understand that's what Democratic Socialists are kind of about, which is like, are they going to make socialism happen? No. There's too much resistance in our political system, but because they come in with big ideas and because they come in with a bold vision, they're going to get more than somebody who just comes in having already pre-compromised.
Yeah. I think that we in the Illinois race for the Democratic nomination for the open Senate seat, I think we saw that. We at this radio station, we hosted a Senate forum among the top 3 candidates, Rajna Krishnamurthy and Juliana Stratton and Robin Kelly. And Robin and Juliana came out and they were like, because they were asked, everybody was asked about Medicare for all, and they were like, hell yes. You know, there should be some kind of single payer program. Healthcare is a right. And when it got to Raja Krishnamurthy, who's very, very much a centrist, his heart was in the right place. And what he was trying to say is, well, rather than reach for the stars and miss, we should scale back to something that's more doable. Like, well, why don't we just propose lowering the age of Medicare to 62 rather than 65? And man, the voters of Illinois weren't having it. They were not having it.
Yeah, and again, we all, okay, maybe there's some people now that are young enough to not to remember this, and that's fair, good. But I remember the many fights over universal health care, and every single time it got smaller and smaller. Like, Obamacare initially had a public option in it. They had to strip that out in order to get it passed.
Thank you, Joe Lieberman.
Yeah. And like, Obamacare was a smaller ask than Hillary Care during, like, what Hillary and Bill Clinton proposed in the 90s was even more robust. And that just got killed entirely. So I think, you know, the reality is, and then there was actually previously attempts to pass just what we would call Medicare for all. And so I think, you know, now that everyone knows that this sort of patchwork system isn't working, we need somebody to go in and say, the goal here is everyone has health insurance, you know, no exceptions. And with the knowledge that, you know, unfortunately, like, it's probably going to be a long road there, but at least we have the goal.
Yeah. I would rather reach for the stars and fall short than scale back the ambitions and to something that is much more that is weaker, that is much more diluted. I think there's a lot of voters who feel that way. Amanda, we need to take another break. Amanda Marcotte and I will be right back after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
With me is Salon Political Senior Editor Amanda Marcotte. She also wrote the book, Troll Nation, How the Right Became Trump-Worshipping Monsters Set on Effing Liberals, America, and Truth Itself. Amanda, what do you have in the works now? Either another book or what are the topics you're planning to write about in the near future?
So tomorrow at Salon, I've got a piece going up about the Todd Blanche situation and why I think that he is unwilling to let go of this slush fund. He and Trump are unwilling to let go of the slush fund. And and the other thing I'm doing is prepping for season 2 of Standing Room Only on YouTube, which is the show I host on YouTube. It'll be coming back in September, so we're excited about that. We're planning some episode ideas. Don't have anything concrete yet, but we will get to it.
How are you going to report on and cover the midterm elections?
That's a good question. We're kind of tentatively hoping to highlight some of the candidates that are really giving Republicans fits this year, like James Tallarico, Abdul El Sayed, and John Ossoff, I think, are 3 that have really been on my radar as ones that are terrifying Republicans. And I have some interesting theories as to why, but we will hopefully be able to cover that soon.
I think that there are a lot of Republicans who are afraid of John Ossoff because I'm beginning to hear more and more and more that he might be, at least at this moment in time, appear to be the strongest presidential candidate for 2028. Would you see it that way?
Initially, I wouldn't have thought so, especially since he's really banked a lot on an anti-corruption message. And it was not my sense that was particularly strong as a message. I really fell into that cynical view that voters just don't care. But now that I'm seeing Republicans panic over the slush fund and beginning to really realize that this slush fund is a huge political liability for Trump in a way a lot of other things aren't, I'm beginning to think that maybe that John Ossoff is onto something, that voters are going to resonate with this idea that corruption is a major campaign issue, especially since so much of the corruption is about things like the slush fund, which is sucking money out of your and my pocket so that Donald Trump and his cronies can pay each other.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of corruption, though, maybe I'm overly cynical. Quite possibly I'm overly cynical. But why wouldn't Todd Blanche just say, okay, I will sign a piece of paper that says, there's going to be no slush fund. And then down the road, either Todd or Trump can come up with a reason why it does have to be reinstated. I mean, these are not people that abide by anything. If they put it down on paper, that doesn't really mean what it might mean if you sign something or I sign something. Trump could just do an executive order that anything Todd Blanche signed before he was confirmed is null and void. That he could do something like that. I'm not quite sure why Blanche doesn't just capitulate. Do you have any idea about that?
Well, because he's a lawyer, so he knows that that has no standing, right? Already the slush fund is in jeopardy because a federal judge said that it's illegal, that Trump can't just sue himself and then settle with himself to pay himself, which is what created the slush fund in the first place, right? They're still litigating it, so I'm sure they are hoping that they can continue to keep that money in play. And that's why Blanche won't sign something. But if he signs something that says, I will not be doing these payouts, then he really can be legally prevented from doing it by the courts. And it's important to remember that while the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump immunity from prosecution, it didn't extend it to everybody that works for him. Todd Blanche, I'm sure, is well aware, and I've heard reporting from folks on the Hill that say a lot of these folks are well aware that they could be facing consequences even if Trump doesn't, and they're worried about it. They are genuinely sweating the possibility that the next Democratic president will do what Joe Biden didn't have the guts to do, which is to actually start arresting people for the crimes they committed while in office.
But if he's a really good lawyer, don't you think he could draw up a document that finesses it and as at least one loophole that he could claim protects him? I mean, come on. He's a lawyer, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what he's going to end up doing. I saw John Thune saying that he thinks that the confirmation hearing will, or that the confirmation, that the nomination will go forward next week, he thinks. And that Cornyn and Tillis just need to have their concerns satisfied. So I assume they're going to come up with some ruse to make Cornyn and Tillis look like they won something without actually giving them anything. But if they were if Cornyn and Tillis were sincerely holding up his nomination because they're concerned about the slush fund, if Blanche gave them some phony document that was like, I pinky swear that we're not going to do a slush fund, but I've got my fingers crossed behind my back, they would just stop him again, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not, it depends on how sincere they are, because they also are lawyers and they have lawyers and they could see through any kind of ruse he comes up with. But yeah, I assume he's going to do what you say, because he wants, this is all political theater as far as I can tell. Yeah. And, he's already in so deep, because do you think nobody told him what happened to, Rudy Giuliani, what happened to release the Kraken, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, that the lawyers who work with Trump tend to not fare well in the long run? Pam Bondi.
Yeah, I mean, the Florida bar is doing an investigation to possibly strip her law license away from her.
What I have learned about Donald Trump is he has an endless well of people that think they're the one that will avoid the Trump curse.
Yep.
There's a sucker born every day, or else con artists like Trump would never get as far as they do. And the way that con artists work is they convince their marks that they're in on the con. And so one person after another thinks that they're the exception. They think they're in on the con and that those other people weren't. And that's just it. He just runs the same con over and over again, and there's a sucker born every minute, I guess.
Well, and I've heard from people that when he wants to be, that Donald Trump can be very, very charming. The problem is that once you show even the slightest bit of independent thought, you're cut off. You're tossed to the side. And I just don't understand how it keeps happening to people who should know better over and over and over again. But you know what? You're absolutely right. If it didn't keep happening over and over again, Trump wouldn't be where he is now.
Yeah, it's worth remembering. Todd Blanche already made $10 million off of Trump defending him in court.
Money that he will probably spend defending himself after Trump is gone, unless he gets some sort of blanket pardon. But that'll be a story for another day, won't it be, Amanda?
Yeah, hopefully.
When does the podcast come back? Do you have a date in September?
Not an exact date, but hopefully at the beginning of the month.
Okay. The podcast is standing room only, but you can read Amanda's writing in salon.com. She is their senior political editor and has an amusing and informative take on the news of the day. Amanda, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
We talk a lot, probably too much, about Donald Trump and his executive orders and his relationship with the Supreme Court, which is kind of interesting. They seem to be pretty partisan. They seem to want to do whatever Donald Trump wants them to do, though sometimes there are lines, even the Supreme Court, the partisan Republicans in robes, there seem to be lines they won't cross. I have some questions about some things that Donald Trump has very recently asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on. But since I really have no understanding of the law or the Supreme Court, I need to talk to somebody who is much more knowledgeable. I'd like to introduce Stephen Schwinn, professor of law at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Law. His area of expertise is things like constitutional law, civil rights, human rights. Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Joan. Thanks for having me.
Okay, my questions tend to be very basic because, as you may have heard, I really have no experience with how the law works, how the Supreme Court works. For instance, the first really basic question I have is, aren't they like all on vacation right now? Aren't they in recess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So their term is technically still going on, but they've stopped hearing cases and they've issued all the major decisions from this term. The court is nevertheless open for business until it sits again in October on what's called its emergency docket. These are cases that the court will hear on an emergency basis, hearing a kind of short-term appeal of a lower court decision. This became a common practice last summer and early in the Trump administration, where the Trump administration was dealt losses on a pretty routine basis in the lower courts and then would appeal on an emergency basis to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court on its emergency docket would typically allow the Trump administration to go forward with whatever it wanted to do. These are short-term rulings. They're not rulings on the underlying merits of the lawsuit, so they don't really say who's right or who's wrong between the parties, but they do traditionally in the Trump administration, they've allowed the administration to move forward with its policies.
When you say they're short-term rulings, does that mean they have an expiration date?
Well, kind of. It's let me give you an example. So one thing that we might be talking about is the President Trump's executive order on mail-in voting.
Mm-hmm. Where they're
up.
supposed to be on vacation, and he's just like, I want the Supreme Court to weigh in on this. Like, is somebody, like you mentioned, there's an emergency basis. Does that mean like somebody's walking around with a beeper? They're on call. If there's a legal emergency, they have to show up at work.
Right. Well, basically, and so, I mean, for something like the emergency docket, they can work remotely, which I imagine many of them are doing. But just to give you a kind of sense of this, Joan, what these have traditionally been used for is for defendants who are on death row, who are on the verge of execution, may petition the Supreme Court as an emergency measure to stop the execution so that they can challenge some aspect of the sentence or their conviction or something else that's going on. In the Trump administration, we've seen this expand and accelerate to all areas of public policy. And so the typical situation is the Trump administration will try to implement this or that policy. It'll get held up in the lower courts. The Trump administration will run to the Supreme Court and say, hey, we have an emergency here. We need to implement this policy. And typically what the Supreme Court has done in most of these cases so far is to say, yeah, that's right. This is an emergency. And we're going to allow the Trump administration to go ahead and implement its policy, even as the lower courts continue to hear the case on the underlying merits. And ultimately, in theory, the case could go against the Trump administration. But the problem with this emergency docket is that in the meantime, the Trump administration gets to do what it wants to do.
Mm-hmm. I see. And for this emergency basis, is it all of them? Is it just a couple of them? Is it whoever happens to be around that day?
Right. Really good question. So the justices are assigned to different federal appeals courts that are organized geographically around the country. And so the petition will initially go to one justice. But then if the petition is of any legal significance, that justice will share it with the rest of the court, and then the entire court will decide.
So I wrote an executive order about mail-in ballots, and the courts have invalidated. Supreme Court, this is an emergency. Would he argue that it's an emergency because we're coming up on the midterms? Would that constitute a real emergency? It's not like anybody's going to be executed.
Joan, I got to tell you, this is where the Supreme Court has really played fast and loose with this idea of emergency. Essentially, the Trump administration has been going to the court in these cases and saying that it's an emergency because the president isn't able to do what the president wants to do. And the Supreme Court has effectively accepted that as an emergency.
Interesting. Okay. The other thing that I've read that he wants the Supreme Court to weigh in on is this $85 million follow-up verdict for E. Jean Carroll. And I read that he's going to the Supreme Court because he doesn't think he should have to pay it. And he wants them to, like, I don't know, cancel it or something. How do you justify that as an emergency? Ooh, I have to pay this and I don't want to. That's an emergency.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher. If you think about what the Supreme Court has done with presidential power and presidential immunities in recent decisions, it becomes a little bit clearer what the Trump administration is trying to press here. The Supreme Court a couple of terms ago granted all but absolute immunity to a president for actions that they take while they're in office. And apparently what the Trump administration is trying to persuade the court is that when it libeled E. Jean Carroll, that was part of the president's official responsibilities.
To libel her?
He should be immune. Yeah, exactly. So that he should be immune from it.
Good grief. I have a rather jaundiced view of the current Supreme Court. You know, they don't seem to have any respect for precedent. It seems to me that they have a conservative agenda and that they twist the law to fit what they want to happen. But again, I don't know the inner workings. Maybe that's not how you see it. Explain to me.
Joan, I'm going to say this in the most lawyerly way I can. I don't disagree with you. I think it's harder and harder to defend this court as an independent court, a politically independent court. We do see flashes of independence. So, for example, the Supreme Court struck the president's idea of birthright citizenship earlier this year. It struck the president's tariffs earlier this year. But those cases, in my view, really are the exception, not the rule. The rule is that the Supreme Court seems, I really hate to say this, but basically in the pocket of the Trump administration.
Yeah. And with the tariff ruling, I remember when that came down, and I remember Donald Trump being interviewed by somebody and looking at the camera and saying, the countries that I've imposed tariffs on, you guys better keep paying them. Which seemed to fly in the face of the Supreme Court ruling, which led me to think about how do they enforce their rulings? I mean, if Donald Trump tells them to go pound sand, what is the mechanism for saying, no, we ruled this, and no, I don't want to do that, I don't like that. What can they do?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, so the saying that we use, court watchers use, is that the courts have neither the power of the purse nor the power the sword. They don't have the power of spending that Congress has, and they don't have the military power that the president has. All they have is the strength of the force of their reasoning to persuade we, the people, that they're a legitimate arm of government. And that legitimacy seems quickly to be going away. I think you're exactly right in your assessment that the court really doesn't have an enforcement mechanism, and the Trump administration uniquely has found ways to exploit that lack of enforcement in order to be able to press on with its agenda. You had mentioned tariffs, for example. Immediately after the first tariff ruling, the president pivoted to a different statutory authority that he claimed allowed him to impose tariffs. Now, of course, it didn't. So when the courts ruled that, he pivoted to yet another authority that he said allowed him to impose tariffs. And, we'll continue to see him pivot this way to impose his tariffs on the country, irrespective of what the court says.
I'm speaking with Stephen Schwinn, professor of law at UIC Chicago School of Law. I have more very basic questions, which I will be asking Stephen when we come right back after this break.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Hey, it's Joan Esposito, and I want to tell you about 120 Life. 120 Life is a drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. My mom struggled with high blood pressure for much of her adult life, and for many of us, high blood pressure runs in the family. 120 Life is a great-tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve your blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure, see if it works for you. Some people reported results in as little as 2 weeks, and I've been enjoying 120 Life because it's a fruit drink that isn't overly sugary sweet. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund. And you can get a 20% discount on your order. Use the code JOAN, Joan, for 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Stephen Schwinn is a professor of law at the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Law, knows about constitutional law, civil rights, human rights. Constitutional law, you touched on birthright citizenship, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is part of the Constitution. And I remember watching a bunch of lawyers on cable TV, and they were like, this is a no-brainer. They should basically come out tomorrow morning and just say, yeah, no, this is ridiculous. Lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. And yet we didn't get the birthright citizenship decision until much, much later in the court calendar. And I think it was Ketanji Brown who was making a speech somewhere, and she was kind of asked about some of this stuff, and she, I thought, very carefully answered, well, it really is important that we have like a full-throated discussion. My question is, when so many legal experts say that some of the things that have been asked of the court should be literally open and shut, that it should be like the next day they're all like, no way, that's not going to happen. And yet, things like the birthright citizenship take way longer than people expected. And some things for the immunity ruling. I saw a bench, again, cable news network. This is, the president is not above the law. He's not a king. There's no way the Supreme Court is going to give him any kind of immunity. And then they did. So, what is going on there? What am I missing? What are the lawyers on cable news missing when they say these things should be open and shut, or this particular case, the answer is clear what it should be, and then it's not? So I'm confused by that, because if you're a constitutional law expert and I ask you to weigh in on something, and you say, well, the Constitution says this, and then the Supreme Court rules a different way, how is that possible if we're all looking at the same Constitution?
Right. Great question, Joan. And, I'll confess it's kind of hard for me to answer because I'm right there with all those commentators that said birthright citizenship ought to be an easy case. Presidential immunity.
They said that one should be 9-0.
Case.
9-0.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is read the 14th Amendment and understand just a wee little bit about our country's history and tradition to know that the Trump administration's view of birthright citizenship was completely off the wall. But here's the stunning thing. So not only did this decision take way, way too long, there were also 4 full members of the Supreme Court that bought onto the president's view of constitutional birthright citizenship, that said that he was right on the constitutional piece of this. And the best way I can explain that is, we've seen time and time again over our country's history where new and novel legal theories kind of work their way into Supreme Court opinions. What happened in this case is you had a kind of a wackadoo, off-the-wall legal theory about birthright citizenship that worked its way into our kind of judicial consciousness in just an alarming, speedy rate, and ultimately worked its way into the minds of 4 sitting Supreme Court justices, so that 4 justices on our court signed on to the president's view of birthright citizenship under the Constitution. It really was stunning.
Well, and also, I'm sorry, but I think Brett Kavanaugh in his confirmation hearing flat out lied. I mean, Roe v. Wade, are you going to overturn it? Well, precedent? No, I say Amy Coney Barrett, same thing. Well, it's precedent. We have huge respect for precedent. Not even worth talking about because that's already settled law. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. How did that happen?
Yeah, right. Time and time again. And, you might be, and listeners might be recalling the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade, the more recent decisions about the president's control over independent agencies, including the Federal Trade Commission, overturning a nearly century-long decade. It really is stunning, the work that this court is doing, but not just the work, the speed at which it's doing it is just stunning.
You talked about the fact that Donald Trump said, well, the independent agencies, I should still be able to fire anybody from them that I want to, which in my mind means they're not really independent. But what do I know? I think that the decision of the Supreme Court on this one was really telling in a very negative way, because they were like, oh, yeah, no, the independent agency, no, the president can still fire anybody. Oh, except for the Fed. That one, it really is independent, and he can't just fire those people, which to me said, we know what he wants to do, that he wants to upend all of this. And while he may do some harm to the country by, taking away the independence of the FCC, we can't afford the global meltdown that will occur if he really starts tinkering with the Federal Reserve. To me, the fact that they exempted the Federal Reserve indicated that they knew what this was going to lead to. I don't know. That's the way I interpreted it.
No, I think you're exactly right. I agree with you entirely. And what's stunning about that is that they're willing to kind of recognize the political and policy realities when when their decisions align with what are their economic interests, right? Like the justices, like all of us, are concerned about their 401ks and want to make sure that the Federal Reserve is going to be independent so they don't screw up our finances. And yet they're not willing to take account of political realities in other situations that don't align with their interests. And here I'm thinking, Joan, of the decision revoking temporary protected status for Haitians and Syrians. The court was just willfully blindful of the Trump administration's statements that were just outright racist about Haitians under TPS here in the United States. They basically said, we don't really recognize that as racism. We don't need to be concerned about that. Similarly, in the Voting Rights Act case that came down this term, we don't need to really recognize racism in voting rights because it's really all about politics.
And yet, when Joe Biden tried to put together an executive order that was going to get rid of student debt, the Supreme Court, oh, no, you can't do that. Look at the laws. Look at the laws. I mean, it's very clear you don't have this power. So Joe Biden didn't have the power to do that, but Donald Trump seems to be someone who has the power to do whatever he wants. The Supreme Court doesn't seem to be consistent to me.
No, and it really is. It's a lack of consistency, and it's a particular legal theory that really is coming to a head in the Trump administration. It's called the unitary executive theory. The idea here is that the president, as the unitary head of the executive branch, ought to have plenary power over what goes on in the Article 2 executive branch. And so that then leads the court to say things like the president can fire members of the FTC who are independent commissioners. The president can fire them without cause and for any reason whatsoever, including political reasons. But then also that the president can impound federal funds, can rearrange federal agencies, can fire civil service employees. All of these things have come up on the court's shadow docket, and the court has allowed the president to move forward with them. And best I can tell, under this kind of expanded muscular version of this unitary executive theory that says that the president has plenary control over the Article 2 branch.
If that is truly the case, and that is truly what they believe, why didn't Joe Biden have that same authority? Why was he regularly thwarted by this court?
That's the big question. That's exactly right.
And here's the other thing. I mean, I assume that to be seated on the Supreme Court, you have to have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of experience. How can they fail to see the damage their decisions are doing to our country? Do they not see it? Is that the point? They wanted this to happen?
I'm going to, for a minute, try to channel what the majority must be thinking in some of these cases and sort of take them at their word when they tell us this. I think what they're thinking is that the Constitution has been a little out of alignment, a little out of whack for some time now, maybe as long as almost 100 years. And that the Roberts Court sees it as its mission to put the separation of powers back into alignment, to rejigger individual rights so that they're back into alignment, and that it's doing this in this kind of baby step, piecemeal way. And eventually, again, I'm kind of guessing here, but sort of reading what they're writing, eventually we're going to sort of right this ship and get our separation of powers back in alignment, get our understanding of individual rights back in alignment, which is very different than how we've understood it for the last 100 years or so.
Amen to that. Tell me a little bit about Constitution 360.
So this is my effort to help with civics education. I feel passionate about civics education, especially in these times. I think it's really important that people understand the way our Constitution works and operates and how it overlaps with public policy and politics. And so what I've endeavored to do is start to put together a resource, and it's still in its infancy, but try to put together a resource and a blog that'll share information with we the people in a kind of plain-spoken, ordinary way.
And I want to also tell people that you have started a Substack that they can find. It's just your name, Stephen D. Schwinn, correct?
I did, yes, and that's in its infancy as well. I'm trying to build these out with the idea of trying to educate people about what's going on. But I got to tell you, with this kind of fire hose of stuff coming out of Washington, it's really, really hard to keep up.
Oh, tell me about it. Tell me about it. Not only am I trying to pay attention to your area of expertise, the law, but I'm also trying to pay attention to what's happening in Iran and what's happening with Todd Blanche and what's happening with Ukraine and what's happening here in the country. And some days I do better than others, Stephen.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but I think what you're doing is really, really important. I don't know when we stopped teaching civics, but there are so many people. My daughter-in-law is a middle school teacher, and she, as part of social studies, she's telling her kids like how the government works and, you know, what different offices are about elections and all this stuff. It's so important. People need to be educated voters to make the right decisions. So I really hope the Substack goes crazy, and I can't wait to take a look at Constitution 360.
Well, thanks, Joan, and thanks to your daughter for her good and important work.
Stephen Schwinn, professor of law, University of Illinois, Chicago School of Law. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
As we just heard from Stephen Schwinn, things are very, very busy all the time in the world of law and politics. We are very pleased to welcome Representative Raja Krishnamurthy back to talk with us. How are you doing, Raja?
I'm good. How are you, Joan?
I'm keeping my head above water. That's some days about all I can do. There's so much I want to talk to you. Now, you're on the Intelligence Committee and on the Oversight Committee. Those are two very important committees right now. As part of the intelligence community, do you get briefed on the latest with Russia and Ukraine and Iran? Are you always brought up to speed on that?
Yeah. Yes, the answer is we are brought up to speed, but it's a little bit delayed. I think part of that is, intentional. They don't want us to be able to conduct oversight with regard to what's happening in this disastrous, catastrophic, illegal, and unconstitutional war in Iran. With regard to Ukraine, I think that we get pretty good updates there because, just last week we got a very in-depth one, and I feel finally Ukraine is on the front foot. And this is exactly the time that we have to step up and help them like never before.
I think you're right. And I've been one of the headlines earlier this week, and I think it was in the New York Times, was essentially it was like, now that Donald Trump sees that Ukraine just might be a winner, he's warming up to President Zelensky because, he can't be associated with a loser. And I thought that was one of the most positive statements I've seen about where Ukraine stands in this conflict.
I think that's right. I think that, Zelensky and the Ukrainians have put themselves in a position where even people on the right are, starting to kind of gravitate toward them. And hey, I'm all for that because, we have to, as a country, on a bipartisan basis, come together and help these guys. They're fighting their hearts out, and they're really fighting for freedom so that we can all enjoy our freedoms. I truly believe that. And by the way, I have to say this. I think the Ukrainians are perhaps the best fighting force in Europe. They are certainly the most courageous and some of the most innovative. And they are really taking the fight to the Russians.
They really absolutely are in a wonderful way. At the beginning of the show today, I was talking about what's going on in the Middle East. We now have a drone attack in Egypt. Bahrain and Kuwait have sent jet fighters on secret missions. Saudi Arabia is talking about a sea and land offensive against the Houthis. It sounds like things are starting to spread, that it is starting to be a bigger, more regional conflict. Do you see it that way?
I do. I think that it's chaos, honestly. And I think that this plays to the Iranians' advantage because they have many more targets once they kind of expand the battlefield, so to speak. That includes all these other countries that you're talking about and their interests, our bases throughout the region. And, hundreds of our men and women have now been wounded or killed in this illegal war. There is no military resolution to this whatsoever. We should end the hostilities, come to the table, get our friends, partners, and allies, and even some of our adversaries to the table to negotiate an end to this, remove the mutual blockades, which just end up hurting Americans, especially at the gas pump, And then finally, we have to remove leverage from the Iranians. I mean, we got to wean ourselves off the very fossil fuel that they've now, put a chokehold on. Mm-hmm. And so the Trump administration, when it axes like 200 to 300 projects with the DOE on renewable energies as well as electric vehicle technologies, they are basically giving the Iranians more leverage. Mm-hmm. And that makes all of us more vulnerable right now.
Do you think part of the reason why Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, the Middle Eastern countries are getting involved now is because they have seen that we cannot protect them and that they better protect themselves?
In part, yes. In fact, we are starting to run low on certain key munitions that would otherwise provide air defenses, not only for ourselves, but for them. These are called basically like Patriot air missiles, THAAD interceptors, SM-3 interceptors. These are all different types of air defense systems with key kind of munitions that are starting to run low because they've been so depleted by the conflict thus far. We are also running low on Tomahawk missiles, which are the missiles fired from our guided missile destroyers that are necessary for long-range strikes. And, what I'm really worried about is not only are we kind of inviting aggression here in this war with Iran, but we're also inviting aggression and showing weakness to our other adversaries, whether it's Russia or the Chinese Communist Party or North Korea, and that could slide us toward conflict with them as well.
I think the Iranians are also seeing the same reporting that we are depleting our munitions. And the fact that Donald Trump is calling a ceasefire and expecting everybody to fall in line, even though there doesn't seem to be any muscle behind it, we don't seem to be giving Iran a reason to capitulate. And I don't think Donald Trump has the knowledge, the expertise, or is surrounded by anybody with enough knowledge and expertise to figure a way out of this. Do you think this will be a forever war? It has that feel to it.
It absolutely does. It feels like a total quagmire, and we're basically doubling and tripling down on really bad kind of strategies or bets or gambles, whatever you want to call it, with shifting goals at the same time. And I got to tell you, I think that the Iranians have figured out that their pain tolerance is much higher than Donald Trump's. Mm-hmm. And so every time they do something that raises the price of oil, then Trump says, oh, well, let's have a ceasefire or something like that. And then they get a little more leverage. And then they do it again. They get a little more leverage. And so it becomes one of those situations where I think that they have his number, and they have a much more militant regime now than before. And I really fear, Joan, that they are going to accelerate their development of a nuclear weapon. I think that at this point we should just assume that, and I think that would be a bad day for the region.
Is that why the Trump administration announced that they were going to permit Saudi Arabia to, I believe it was start enriching uranium or something? Because
Yes.
Do you think the fear is if Iran has a nuke, then somebody else in the region, like maybe Saudi Arabia, also should have nukes other than Israel, which is kind of separate?
I think that's part of it, but I think that the Saudis are, I don't trust them with a nuclear weapon, and I don't trust them with this enrichment capability. This should absolutely come through Congress. And again, I think that the Trump administration is making a misstep. Now, in the background, Joan, we didn't talk about this, but I think there are tremendous business interests that are connected to Trump, to Jared Kushner, to Steve Witkoff, to all these cronies that are also helping to drive this foreign policy. I would not be surprised if Jared Kushner and Witkoff and Trump had some kind of connection or ownership in some interest that would benefit from the Saudis developing a nuclear, a much more expansive nuclear program.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised if American companies that would benefit are connected to them as well.
Oh, well, just look for the ones that have either Eric or Don Jr. on their board, because that seems to be, Eric and Don Jr. are on the board of this drone company that just got a no contest government contract. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. I mean, this is the ultimate kind of price of this corruption, right? I mean, we talk about the corruption, we talk about the vanity projects, we talk about what we're seeing in terms of maybe the most corrupt administration, certainly in my lifetime. But it has a real price, and it has a price in terms of our foreign policy and putting our country at risk and endangering Americans, right? At the end of the day, it's about, you would think that the president would have, at the top of his mind, the protection of the welfare and well-being of Americans first and foremost. But that's not what's going on here. And I think that I fear that their personal interest and profit motive come ahead of those principles.
Yeah, I think that's a lesson we've all learned. I also want to ask you, I know you're on the Oversight Committee, and what's going on with the Epstein files has been something your committee has been dealing with. I was reading on MS Now that, today was the date when Todd Blanche was supposed to turn over documents to Judge Emmett Sullivan in this case that Katie Fang and an activist group brought, saying, hey, there was a transparency law. We're journalists. We're damaged because we don't have access to these files. It was reported that for now, the Justice Department has turned over unredacted Epstein-related records. They've given them directly to Judge Emmett Sullivan for his private review, so he can sort of weigh in on what's there and what's not and what's redacted and what's not. Is that progress, or is that just another delay?
It's delay, right? I mean, it's clear what the law says, and then there's what the Trump White House does. And just to kind of give your listeners a little bit of background, we think there's like 2 to 3 million pages of documents that have not been turned over that need to be turned over by the DOJ. I believe Todd Blanche is the architect of this cover-up, preventing the disclosure of these files, but also just not investigating or prosecuting, I believe, numerous co-conspirators to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And as you know, there were thousands of then girls, now middle-aged women, who've yet to receive a single iota of justice from this ghastly sex trafficking ring. And so Blanche has no business being the Attorney General. I was glad to see that Trump is now talking about withdrawing his nomination. I just think that we have to put as much pressure as possible on them to disclose all the files, whether it's part of the Fang lawsuit or just in compliance with the law, because, we got to get to the bottom of this.
One of the survivors was interviewed, and, the Republicans on the committee said that they wouldn't even consider Blanche's nomination unless he met personally with the survivors, which he apparently reluctantly did. Danny Bensk, one of the survivors, described Todd Blanche's attitude as condescension. As at one point when they were talking, he said, "Get to the point. What's the point?" And which sounds like you would expect, but you'd think Todd Blanche could have been smarter than that. I mean, how is that going to advance his cause? He could have been, let me hear, this is terrible what happened to you. When I'm head of the DOJ, you don't have to worry, you'll be taken care of. I mean, come on. This is like, interview media 101. You're forced to meet with these people. They're laying their hearts out, and you're like treating them badly.
You would think. I think that the arrogance and just his attitude are so wretched at this point, Joan, I think that he thinks he can get away with anything, and he just needed to check the box and quote unquote meet with them, and that's about it. I hope Tom Tillis, who so far has been holding up his Blanche's nomination, continues to do so. I don't know what's going to happen. Also, John Cornyn, I saw, is holding up his nomination because he's not willing to put in writing, or DOJ is not willing to put in writing, that they're going to get rid of this anti-weaponization slush fund, which basically is a disaster. By the way, it also gives a get out of jail free card for any future violations of IRS or tax laws that the Trump family commits. I mean, it's just a joke of a quote unquote settlement that they are entering into the DOJ with the Trump family. So I hope these guys hold out.
Yeah, I absolutely hope they do too. Congressman, thank you so much. I know you're really, really busy. Thank you for taking a few minutes to talk to me and my audience. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you are interested in buying a home or refinancing the one you've got, call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. They have almost 800 five-star Google reviews. Here's one from Mary. David is fantastic. He's always ready to help, whether buying, selling, refinancing, or helping with finances. He's patient, even with complicated issues, and goes the extra mile when others would not. I can't recommend him enough. You won't regret calling David for any of your mortgage issues. I'm recommending him to my daughter and anyone needing a mortgage. So Mary helped call David to help consolidate her debt. She was so thankful for David's guidance that she posted that five-star review. If you want that same outstanding service, call Team Hochberg now, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped me and thousands of WCPT listeners, but they can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or go online 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Heartland Signal reporter Rich Eberwein joins us every Thursday to tell us about some of the stories that he has been reporting for our digital cousin, heartlandsignal.com. He is here now. Hey, Rich, how are you?
Doing well, Joan. It's been a minute. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, tomorrow starts the weekend. I don't know if anybody told you that. This is my new declaration. Friday it's now a 3-day weekend, and Friday's part of it.
You're a pioneer, Joan.
I am. I really am. I'm a trendsetter. Okay, enough about me. What are you doing? What do you got for us today?
So I wanted to talk about something that we've been covering over in Michigan. You know, there's a lot going on in Michigan. Obviously, the primary elections are next week, and you know, there's a big high-stakes Senate race. But I think this story that we've been covering is kind of flying under the radar as far as national coverage, and it has to do with money in politics. There's obviously a lot of appetite, and there has been for a while, to overturn Citizens United and get money out of politics, right? But there's something happening in Michigan that's at the state level that is doing something that could combat this and implement restrictions on campaign finance. There's a ballot initiative that just got approved last Friday that would basically prohibit the state's utility electric companies from donating to political candidates and committees. And this is important because in Michigan, there are two giant electric utility companies that essentially have this state-regulated monopoly. The state gave them 90% of the electric utility market back in 2008. And since then, these companies have grown very large, and year over year, they donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to candidates and politicians on both sides of the aisle in the Michigan state legislature. And what we've seen happen too is these companies routinely get rate hikes approved by the state as well. So while they're raking in all these profits and spreading that money around the state legislature, Michigan residents are dealing with some of the most unreliable power in the country. And
worth paying for.
Yeah. And we saw a good example of this happen earlier this month. There were these powerful thunderstorms rolled through Michigan over 4th of July weekend, and 750,000 utility customers lost power, and thousands of DTE customers, DTE Energy, one of those two utilities, didn't have their power restored for up to 5 days after the storm. So, incredibly unreliable across the board as far as, throughout the country. And these companies face severe backlash because of those outages, obviously. They continuously pointed customers toward this $42 daily reimbursement that they could have added onto their bill. Meanwhile, a lot of people lost thousands of dollars because they didn't have power for 3, 4, 5 days, right?
Yeah, and I'm just picturing those freezers where everything is thawing out. You can't cook it and eat it fast enough.
Yeah, we cited one interview that ABC did with a restaurant owner in Michigan who was about to open a new restaurant and had to throw out $8,000 worth of food. So this obviously severely impacted thousands of people who were seeking, some kind of reimbursement, and DTE Energy pointed them towards $42 daily.
Oh my God.
So, there's obviously a lot of frustration around this throughout the state, and there has been for a long time, but the state legislature hasn't done much to curb this power that the utility companies have. And so I think this is just a good example of, how direct democracy can skirt the state legislature and give, the people of Michigan what they want. And that's their utility companies to be reliable and to not pay off by our politicians and to be regulated properly.
It seems like a pretty low bar, Rich.
You would think, right? Alas, that is where we are in the United States. But, so this initiative just got approved. The petition signatures just got approved last week. And so there's a very good chance that it will appear in front of voters in November. And again, that will prohibit utility companies from donating to candidates and also increase the, the regulations around donor disclosure documents. Anybody who donates more than $5,000 needs to disclose who they are and where they work. And it just tightens those disclosure. So there's not as much dark money.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have to do things at the state level because we're certainly not going to get anything done at the federal level in the near future.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been kind of a challenge repealing Citizens United at the federal level. Understatement of the decade. But I think this is just a good example. I think it's one of these positive stories that you always want me to talk about, Joan, where state level organizing and grassroots organizing is,
Yay! You led with the good story. We have a couple of minutes left. Tell me about this thing that you just put up yesterday about Doge and how it might affected the wildfires. Yeah. Okay. So there's some wildfires happening in northeastern Minnesota, and basically, the national forest up there, Superior National Forest, under the Biden administration, was awarded a $10 million grant to clear out fallen trees, and it was an area that had a high risk of forest fires. And basically, last year when the Trump administration came in, they paused. They had that universal freeze on all federal grants, right? So that money wasn't able to get there. So they weren't able to clear out this area and, make it less adverse to wildfires. And earlier this month, lightning struck in the area, and 60,000 acres of it have been on fire and has wildfire smoke has been all over the area, and people had to evacuate, and people aren't able to get into the national park. And basically, the Forest Service workers who work there
were saying like this was a project that was shovel ready until Doge came in and paused the grant, and it could have mitigated or even stopped this forest fire from happening. Yeah.
Elon Musk, the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. I mean, obviously very costly too. The governor, Tim Walz, issued a peacetime emergency, so it's costing a lot of money because it would cost a lot less to do the prevention work than it does to handle all of this and get equipment and workers in during an emergency situation. So trickle-down effects of the Doge cuts and grant freezes, right? They had to make sure that there was no DEI involved in any of these grants, which is, ridiculous.
Rich, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Joan.
That's going to do it for me. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is next. It's kind of a medical show. She's got her co-host is Dr. Kathy Tynas. She's also going to talk to Dr. Shika Jain, among others. And remember, Richard Chu kicks us off at 6 a.m. He's going to talk to Amy McDonald, campaign manager for the Democrat Ashley Bell in North Carolina's 10th congressional district race. And I will be back tomorrow, Friday, along with Lady B. We will be wearing our party hats because it is the beginning of the weekend. And as a matter of fact, the final hour tomorrow, we're going to talk to Rebecca Ford and Scott Duff about our favorite entertainments. Take care of yourself. Have a great evening. Remember, the weekend starts tomorrow. Good night.